Page 65. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sechivina lehavin ben yom uven layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokei achivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam roka haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa li kol tzarki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechim mitzadei gover. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten la'ya'ef koah.
Have you seated?
Me, Russell. Unenu hayom v'kol yom u'cheinu chesed rachamim b'nei v'nei chorin v'tikmalenu chasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai gomer chasadim tovim li'amo Yisrael. Yehi Ratzon milchanech. Ashrenu atel chelkenu manim gorlenu mayafa yerushatenu. Ashrenu shenaknu maskimim marvim evavok every amrim pamayim bechol yom. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Kaddish shecha makdashei shemecha b'kaddish shecha be'elmecha u'v'yishuach hatarim v'tagbiya karnenu. Baruch atah Adonai mekaddish shecha barabim. All right. How about Roman numeral number 2, page 69. Rabbi Elazar said, "Whoever does deeds of charity and justice is considered as having filled the world with loving kindness, as it is written, God loves charity and justice. The earth is filled with Adonai's loving kindness." Rabbi Elazar quoted this verse. She opens her mouth with the wisdom, and the Torah of loving kindness is on her tongue. What is the intent of this verse? Is there one Torah of loving kindness and another which is not of loving kindness? Torah studied for its own merit is a Torah of loving kindness, whereas Torah studied for an ulterior motive is not. And some say that Torah studied in order to teach is a Torah of loving kindness, whereas Torah not studied in order to teach is not a Torah of loving kindness. Bottom of 70. יהי רצון מלכנך אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו שתיתן חלקנו בתורתך ונהיה מתלמידיו של אהרון הכהן אוהב שלום ורודף שלום אוהב את הבריות ומרכבן לתורה. 72. היום עם שבת. Odin boom beseva shenim ranim yu hagid ki yashar Adonai suri below avlatabo. 81. Is Moshe kind of violate if you don't? Go slow. Fakta mispedilim acholi pitakta saki v'tazrini simcha l'ma'an yizmecha chavo v'lo yidom Adonai Elohai li'olamodeka. We rise for Baruch Shemar, page 83. Baruch Shemar b'hayalam Baruch Hu Baruch Oseh Bereshit Baruch Omer v'Yoseh Baruch Ozer Mikayim Baruch Mirachem al haaretz Baruch Mirachem al habriot Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov l'Reaf Baruch Chai La'ad V'Kayam La'netzach Baruch Podeh U'Matzil Baruch Shemo 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 Baruch Adonai Melech Olam. Yachichem Melech Mishpach B'nei Shemo Hagadol Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Mahulal Bati Hishpachot.
Have you seated?
80.
86 middle.
Hoshia et Amecha Uvarech et Nachatecha Ureim, 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 Ureim v'nasem, Ureim v'nasem ad ha'olam, Hoshia et amecha, Uvarech et nachatecha, Ureim, 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 Ureim v'nasem, Ureim v'nasem ad ha'olam. אני בחסדך ותקתי יגע ליבי בישועתך, אשירה לאדוני כי גמל עלי. הודו לאדוני כי טוב, כי לעולם חסדו. Hodu Elohei ha-Elohim Ki li'olam chasto Hodu Adonai Adonim Ki li'olam chasto Li'osei niflaot gidolot livado Ki li'olam chasto. Sheb shifleinu zachar lanu ki li'olam chasto Vayifrakenu mitzarenu ki le'olam chasto noten lechem lechol basar ki le'olam chasto hodu le'el hashamayim ki le'olam chasto.
Be seated. 94.
Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat. Tzadika tamar yifrach K'erez balvanon yizgeh shetulim beveit Adonai b'chatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvun b'seva dishenim rananim yiyu lehagi ki ashar Adonai tzuri v'lo Idotechem nimod leveitcha nava kodesh Adonai liorech yamim.
96.
Ashrei yoshvei veitecha od yahangimu chasela. Ashrei am shekachalo, Ashrei am shadonai Elohav. Tehillah David aromimecha Elohai hamelech v'havarecha shimcha le'olam va'ed b'chol yom avarchecha v'halel shimcha le'olam va'ed gadol Adonai umula meod v'nigdu ato ein cheker. Dor lidor yishabach masecha v'urotecha yagidu hadar kivod hodecha v'divrei nifliotecha asicha ve'ezuzno rotecha yomeru ugedulacha asaprena zecher avtucha yabiu V'tzid kadecha yiranenu Chanun v'rachum Adonai Erech apayim ugdal chesed Tov Adonai Lakol v'rachamav al kol masav Yoducha Adonai Kol maasecha v'chasidecha yivarechucha Kvod Adonai yotecha U'echa yidaberu Lehodia lifnei Adam gvurota U'chivod adar malchuto Malchutecha malchut kol olamim U'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor Somech Adonai l'chol hanoflim v'zokef l'chol hakfufim einei chol lecha yisaberu v'ata noten lahem b'tocham be'ito poteach et yadecha u'masbiach l'chol chai ratzon Sadik Adonai b'chol diracha v'chasid b'chol maasav Karov Adonai lechol korah b'chol asher yikrahu be'emet Ritzon yirei ahav yaseh b'yeh Shabbatam yishma v'yoshiem Shomer Adonai et kol ohavav v'yekor hashaim Yashmi tihilat Adonai Yidaber pi vivarech kol basar shem kodsho leolam va'ed v'anachnu nivarech ya me'ata v'yad olam me'ata v'yad olam Hallelujah. Page 100, Psalm 150. Hallelujah, 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 el bikocho, hallelujah, birki auzo, hallelujah, big vurotav, hallelujah, kirov kulo, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 b'tek hashofar, hallelujah, b'nevel v'chinor, hallelujah, b'tofu machol, hallelujah, b'minim ve'ugav, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 b'tziltzalei shama, hallelujah, b'tziltzalei trua, kol hanshama tehallelujah, hallelujah, kol hanshama. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Elohim Elohei Yisrael Seini Flo Levado V'Rashim Kavado Le'olam V'Melech Kavado Ka'aretz Amen B'Amen.
Rise, page 102.
Yoshana. Vaya Yisrael Yad HaGadol Asher Sa'Adonai B'Mitzrayim Vayiram et Adonai Vayaminu B'Adonai U'Moshe Avdo Az Yashir Moshe U'Bnei Yisrael Et Ashira Hazon Adonai Vayomru Lemor Ahashirang Adonai Ki Ga'oga Sus v'rochevo Rama vayam Ozi v'zimratya Vayehi li lishua Ze'eli v'yan behu el he'avi V'yaram amenhu Adonai ish milchama Adonai shemo Markivo paro v'chelo Yahara vayam Umivchar shalishav Tuvu v'yamsuf Tihilmo yichasyu Muyardu b'msolot Kimo aven Yemincha Adonai Nedari b'koach Yemincha Adonai Tirat zoy. Mi chamocha boelim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nohorati lot, o sefer lenatitim. Nabe kochim. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Ki Adonai melech b'goyim v'umashim b'har Tzion shpodet ha'esav v'hayatan Adonai hamlucha v'haya Adonai lemelech kol ha'aretz b'yom hahu Adonai echad hu shemo echad.
Be seated, 104.
Nishmat kol chai tivarech et shemcha Adonai Eloheinu. Ilfim. Okay. Nilchan shabecha unfarecha unavarech Shem kodshecha kamor v'David borchi nafshi et Adonai v'chol karavai et Shem kodsheho ha'el b'tatzumot uzecha hagadol b'chvod shemecha hagibor l'netzach v'no b'norotecha hamelech hayoshev al kisei ram v'nisa.
Remind me, is it JLC Kids coming up today?
If we're on time. What could
Never a problem.
what?
Middle of page 105. Shochei de marom vekadosh shemo Yisharim etit halal v'divrei tzadikim titbarach uvilshon chasidim titromam uvekerev kedoshim titkadash ובמקלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל. שכן חובת כל היצורים לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, להעלה ולקלס. על כל דברי שירות ותשבחו דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך. 106 we rise. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו אל המלך כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו שיר ושפחה, הלל וזמרה, עוז וממשלה הנצח, גדולה וגבורה, תהילה ותפארת, קדושה ומלכות. ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני. אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודאות אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אל חי העולמים, יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבם. בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובימיכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בהגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבא מבורך לעולם לא מלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשא בריחו, יעלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. 107 ברכו את אדוני המבורך umevorach leolam va'ed. Take our seats. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or v'orei choshech oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Hakol yodu v'hakol yishabechu v'hakol yomru kadosh kadosh. Ein kerkecha Adonai Eloheinu ba'olam hazeh, v'ein zulatcha malkeinu l'chayei ha'olam haba. Efes biltecha go aleinu limot hamashiach, v'ein domeh lecha Moshiachenu litchiyat hametim. 108. El Adon al kol hamasim, Baruch hu mevorach befi kol neshama, godlo v'tuvo, mahalei olam. Da'atu tvuna sovevim oton ha'mitga'eh al chayot ha'kodesh v'nedar b'chavod al ha'merkava zechut u'mishor lifnei chi yisom Chesed v'rachamim lifnei chevodo tovim meyorot shebara Eloheinu Yitzaram bedat bevina uvhaskel koach ugevura natan bahem liot moshlim bekerev tevel Mlei mesiv umefikim noga no ezivam bechol ha'olam smechim betzeitam v'sasim bevoam Osim beyema Ritzon konam Pier vechavod Notnim lishmo Sol averina Lezecher malchuto Karal Hashemesh Vayizrachor Ravei yitkin Tzurat alvanam Shevach notnim lo Kol tzeva maron Tiferet ugedula srafim ve'ofanim V'chayot ha'kodesh Shevach notnim lo Kol tzeva maron Tiferet ugedula Srafim ve'ofanim v'chayot ha'kodesh. 109. $110. כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים בימה ובירא רצון כל נעם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובטהרה, בשירה ובזמרה, ומברכים ומשבחים ומפארים ומעריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם. וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה להקדיש ליוצרם מנחת רוח בשפה ברורה ובנימה קדושה, כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו, ואופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מתנשאים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, ברוך ממלכותנו למלך אל חי וקיים. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה ליורו, מהרה ליורו, ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המיורו. 111 אהבה רבה אהבתנו אדוני אלוהינו, חמלה גדולה ויתרה חמלת עלינו, אבינו מלכנו בעבור אבותינו שבטחו בך אבינו מלכנו, ותלמדם חוקי חיים כן תכוננו תלמדנו, אבינו אהב הרחמן המרחם רחם עלינו, ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה, והאר עינינו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו ליראה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש ולא ניכלם ולא ניכשל לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך, והעליינו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו. כי אל פועל ישועות אתה ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. We continue from the middle of 112 through to the middle of 113. Adonai Elohechem emet v'yatziv v'nachon v'kayam v'yashar v'neman v'yahu v'chaviv v'nechmad v'na'im v'nora v'yadir u'mtukan u'mkubal v'tohu v'yafe הדבר הזה עלינו. ודור ודור הוא קיים ושמו קיים וכיסו נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת. יוצרנו צור ישועתנו פודנו מצילנו מעולם שמך אין אלוהים מזולתך עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם. 114. At the middle of the page, page 114, we will conclude with the blessing Ga'al Yisrael and be standing for our silent prayers. The Amidah, if you follow the words as printed in the Siddur, they begin on 115 and conclude on page 120. Please take a seat when you're finished with your own prayers and remain silent on behalf of anybody else who might still be praying. Motzi motzi asirim ufode anavim veyozer veyozer dahalim veyonel yamo veyonel yamo veyechava meilav veyonel yamo v'yechava meilav. We rise Tehilot Le'el Elyon Baruch Hu Mevorach Moshe Miriam Uvnei Yisrael Lechanu Shira V'simcha Rabba V'yameru Chulam Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai Mi Kamocha Nedar Bakodesh Nora Tehilot Osefel Shira Chadasha Shivechu Geulim Leshimecha Asvahat Hayam Yachad Kulam Hodu V'himlichu Ve'yameru Adonai Eloch Le'olam Va'ed Sur Yisrael Kuma Ezrat Yisrael Uvdeinu Mecha Yehuda Ve'Yisrael Go Aleinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch Adonai. יעשה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל. הוא יעשה שלום, הוא יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. הוא יעשה שלום, הוא יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל יושבי תבל. We rise for the community Amidah, page 115b. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu v'Imoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Ve'hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'konei Hakol V'zocher Chazdei Avot V'imahot ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמנת להחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים נקדש את שמך בעולם שם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו אז בקול רעש גדול אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול מתנשאים לעומת שרפים לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו יהי מקומך מלכנו תופיע ותהי מלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך מתי תמלוך בציון בקרוב בימינו בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועת ישכון יתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לנצח נצחים. וייננו תיראנה מלכותך, כדבר אמור בשירי עוזך, בשירי עוזך, על ידי דוד שיח צדקך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. ושיבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. ישמח משה במתנת חלקו, כי עבד נאמן קראת לו, ולתפארת בראשו נתת, ביעמדו לפניך על הר סיני, ושני לוחות אבנים הוריד בידו, וכתוב בהם שמירת שבת, וכן כתוב בתורתך. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. ולא נתתו אדוני אלוהינו לגויי הארצות, ולא הנחלתו מלכנו לעובדי פסילים, וגם מנוחתו לא ישכנו ערלים, כי ישראל עמך נתתו באהבה לזרע יעקב, אשר בם בחרת מקדשי שביעי. כולם יספעו ויתענגו מטובך, והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו, חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר למעשה בראשית. אלוהינו אלוהי אבותינו, רצי במנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך. סבנו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעובדך באמת, והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה וברצון, שבת קודשך, וינוחו ישראל מקדשי שמך. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. רצי אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל ובתפילתם, וישב את העבודה לדביר ביתך, ואישי ישראל ותפילתם באהבתך וברצון, ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך. ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים, ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון. מודים אנחנו לך שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו לעולם ועד. צור חיינו מגן אישנו אתה הוא לדור ודור. נודה לך נספר תהילתך על חיינו המסורים בידיך ועל נשמותינו הפקודות לך. ועל ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו ועל נפלאותיך וטובותיך שבכל עת. ערב ובוקר וצהריים. הטוב כי לא חלו רחמך והמרחם כי לא תמו חסדיך מעולם קיווינו לך. ועל כולם יתברך ויתרומם שמך מלכנו תמיד לעולם ועד. בכל החיים יודוך סלע יהללו את שמך באמת על ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני הטוב שמך ובך נאה להודות. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ברכנו בברכה משולשת בתורה הכתובה על ידי משה עבדך האמורה מפי אהרון ובניו כהנים עם קדושך כאמור. יברכך אדוני וישמרך, יאיר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונקה, יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום. שים 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 שלום, שים שלום טובה וברכה בעולם. שים 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 שלום טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד ביור פניך. שלום, שים שלום טובה וברכה בעולם. שים 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 שלום טובה וברכה, כי ביור פניך נתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו תורת חיים ואהבת חסד וצדקה וברכה ורחמים וחיים וחיים ושלום. שלום, שים שלום טובה וברכה בעולם. שים 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 שלום טובה וברכה, וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה לשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. Full Kaddish 138. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויעמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי וחייכונו ויומכונו וחי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם לא מלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודש בריחו. יעלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה ותושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירם בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יתקבל צלטון ובלטון לכל ישראל קודם אבוהון וישמעיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומה הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן. Torah Service, page 139. אין כמוך ואלוהים אדוני ואין כמעשיך, מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. הרחמים היטיבה ברצונך את ציון, תבנה חומות ירושלים, תבנה לחומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך עולם ונישא, אדון עולם. ויהי בנסוע הארון, ויאמר משה, קומה אדוני, ויפוצו אויביך, וינוסו משנאיך מפניך, כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ובחר אדוני מירושלים, ברוך שנתן תורה, תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה, תורה, לעמו ישראל, בקדוש שבתו. Bottom of page 139 through the top of 140. Page 141, I'll begin with the first verse and I ask everyone to respond. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadlul Adonai iti, uneromema Shemo yachdav. Adonai hagidula v'hagidula v'hatiteret v'hanesach v'haot. Kichol v'shamayim u'va'aretz, kichol v'shamayim u'va'aretz. Adonai amal laka ve'amid na'aseh lechol b'rosh. May be seated. Our Torah reading for this Shabbat is Parashat Pikudei. It's the last Torah reading in the book of Exodus. And it's found on page
564.
564. What page?
564.
564.
For the West Coast
Right,
line.
do I hear 565? Okay. This is the final Torah portion of our book, and also the final Torah portion that talks about the construction of the Mishkan, the portable tabernacle, the home for meeting with God and us. So we'll take a look at how literally the wrapping up takes place. Step in our adjustments. If you want to take your aliyah here standing closer to the Torah, you're invited to come over here to the lectern.
Okay. We're going to now mode again. Nalamud.
Aaron ben Shmuel for Kaddish Torah HaKohen.
Nalia Aleph. Baruch Shenetzah Torah Le'emo Yisrael. Biku Bushata Bo. Latam Pachekim Paradai Leichem. Vayim Kuchem Vayom.
Baruch es Adonai Hamborach. Baruch Adonai Hamborach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher Bochar Banu Mikol Ha'amim Benotan Lonu Es Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Ele fikudei hamishkan mishkan haidut asher prukar api Moshe avodat halaviyim b'yad Itamar ben Aharon HaKohen u'b'tzalel ben Reuven chut mata Yehuda asa et kashet tziva Adonai et Moshe v'ito oholiav ben Achisamach matedan charash v'choshev v'rokem b'tachele tuva argaman u'v'tolat hashani v'ashesh kohal zahav Yasui la melacha v'chol melech HaKodesh v'yehi zehavat tenufa te'esha v'esrim kikar v'shvameot u'shloshim shekel b'shekel HaKodesh v'chesef v'kudei haida me'at kikar v'elef v'shvameot v'chamisha v'shivim shekel b'shekel HaKodesh v'kal ha'golgolet machatzit ha'shekel b'shekel HaKodesh l'chol ha'over ol ha'pekudim miben esrim shana v'mala 600,000 ו3,000 ו550 ויהי מעט כיכר הכסף לצקת את אדני הקודש ואת אדני הפרוכת מעט אדנים למעט הכיכר כיכר לאדן את 1,750 הסבבים לעמודים וסיפה ראשיהם וחישקותם ונחושת התנופה 70 כיכר ועל 2,400 שקל ויספה את אדני פתח המועד ומזבח הנחושת ומקבר הנחושת אשר לו וכל כלי מזבח ואת אדני החצר סביב ואת אדני שער החצר ואת כל יתדות המשכן ואת כל יתדות החצר סביב ומן התכלת והארגמן ותולת השני עשו בידי ישראל לשומרי בקודש ויעשו את בגדי הקודש אשר לאהרון כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Notan Lanu Torah Emet V'chayei Olam Nutav V'Zocheinu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
The second aliyah may be found on page 565, verse 2.
Before we get there, just a word or two. So this is an accounting. The word Pekudei means these are the accounts of, these are the records of the process that was started that encompassed so much communal effort and contributions, both material contributions, literally, some material was brought in, gold and silver and copper and wood, and of course also skill and volunteering on every level. We've talked about this many times because the Torah celebrates this again and again. What we have here is, what we learn from this is the responsibility of the cause that has benefited from all of these donations and contributions of every sort, to account, to give an account, to give a clear, transparent report back to the people who have supported this cause. This is what we've done with your efforts. This is what we've done with all of your contributions. It's all been recorded. Nobody had a problem of forgetting to take that ton of gold that was over there and not record it. It's all recorded, and as we will continue throughout the Torah reading, it's all been used for the proper purpose. A model that has still not been completely learned to be adopted by everybody. One just small detail, at the very end of our Aliyah, chapter 39 begins of the blue, the purple, crimson yards. They also made the service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary. They made Aaron's sacred vestments as the Lord had commanded Moses. So this is, of course, it's a translation, which means an interpretation. The word for service vestments that we have here is bigdei srad. And this phrase, bigdei srad, is subject of controversy among the commentators. What does that word actually mean? Bigdei means clothings. Srad, we have no idea. And we have one camp that says what it says here. The bigdei srad were the vestments that we learned about before, that the Levites had to wear, that the regular priests had to wear, and these were the clothes that they used when they were on duty, the Shacharit b'Kodesh. But there are other arguments that are raised, and Rashi is very strongly in the other camp, who says that's not what it's about. Those clothes are called the clothes of the Levites and the priests and so on and so forth. This is a different term. What is this term about? It's about the coverings that we had to put over every item of the tabernacle when the tabernacle had been dismantled and was supposed to be taken from one place to another. We wandered in the desert and we had to go camp here and then we had to go camp there. Every time we camped someplace, we had the tabernacle, we had to put it back up again. And then once we knew that the cloud of glory, we'll get to that at the very end, spoiler alert, the very last verses of our Torah reading today, when the cloud of glory would move on, we knew we had to move on, and we had to wrap everything up. And we had to wrap it so that the people who, especially the inner sanctum elements, the menorah that I wrote about in the Torah Sparks this week, the ark, and so on, they had to be wrapped up so that the carriers, the porters, the Levites, would not actually see what they were carrying. It was not supposed to be exposed to the public. So we have here, on the one hand, we're transparent about how the money is used, how the contributions are used. Everybody should be able to see and examine the annual report. On the other hand, the items themselves, when they were taken from place to place, as they were transported, they had to be covered. And Rashi says that's what this is. What this is, specially made coverings for these items. If that's the case, then the verse is telling us that not only were the vestments produced with beautiful embroidered yarn and with colors and so on, but the covers were not simply, let's go to Home Depot and get some tarps and cover up the stuff, while the painters are coming in or while something has to be. No, the coverings were themselves beautiful. And one of the things that we need to remind ourselves always when we read these all the Torah portions, some of us read the text, some of us read commentaries, some of us zone out. We do whatever we want to while we're listening to the Torah reading. But one of the things that the Torah reading makes possible is for us to imagine the scene, to imagine what the Torah is talking about, to visualize what the Torah is talking about, and what would it have looked like for this procession of sacred objects mysteriously covered over to be carried along through the desert and be seen by the children of Israel, seen and not seen. And how did that look in the blazing sun of the wilderness and the blazing radiance of the cloud of glory that was also reflected there? So according to Rashi, this was something that was a beautiful spectacle. It wasn't just a, as I say, a simple, let's cover it up so nobody sees it, and let's get it moved on to the next place. I mentioned in the Torah Sparks that the relics, well, it's not relics, but the architectural and artistic records that we have, such as the Arch of Titus that we have in Rome, is white marble, which has its own beauty, but which actually is totally misleading about what the arch originally looked like. And this goes for a lot of classical sculpture. It was meant to be colorful. It was meant to be dazzling in the experience of the viewer. So the menorah that we have tragically recalled on that arch being carried away by the Roman soldiers away from the destroyed temple was originally painted a glowing, beautiful yellow gold. And that's what the menorah was really made of. We'll get to that later. So we can try to use our imaginations and picture what our Torah reading is telling us.
Amen. Vayas Typhod Zahav Techelef Ragaman Tolat Shani V'Sheish Moshe Zar Vayiraku Et Pachei Hazahav Kitzet Petilim Lasod B'Toch HaTechelet Uv'Toch Ragaman Uv'Toch Tolat HaShani Uv'Toch HaSheish Masei Choshev Kedefot Asulo Chovrot Al Shnei Ketzotav Chubar V'Chesef Avudato Asher Alav Mimenu K'Masehu Zahav Techelef Ragaman Tolat Shani V'Sheish Moshe Zar Kasher Tziva Adonai et Moshe V'Yasu et Avnei HaShoham Musabot Mishpatzot Zahav Mefutachot Pituchei Chotam Al Shmo B'nei Yisrael V'Asamotam Al Kitvot Haifod Avnei Zikaron Libnei Yisrael Kasher Tziva Adonai et Moshe V'Yasar HaChoshen Masei Choshev K'Masei Fod Zahav Techelet V'Ragaman Tolat Shani V'Sheish Moshe Zar Ravu Ahaya Kaful Asuet Achoshen Zeret Orko Zeret Rochbo Kaful Vayamaluvo Abba Ature Aven Tur Odem Pitida Uva Reket Hatur Hayachad Ve'atur Hashini Nofech Sapir V'Yahalom Ve'atur Hashilishi Lashem Shvo Ve'Achlama Ve'atur Haravi'i Tashish Shoham Ve'ashfei Musabot Mishpasot Zahav Miluotam Avanim, Ashmo Pnei Yisrael, Heina, Shtemesrei Ashmotam, Pituchei Chotam Ish Ashmo, Lishnem Asar Shavet, Vayasu Al HaChoshen, Shashurot Kavlut Maseh Avot, Zahav Tahor, Vayasu, Shtei Mishpatzot Zahav, Shtei Tabaot Zahav, Vaitenu, Shtei HaTabaot, Al Shnei Ketzot HaChoshen, Vaitenu, Vaitenu Shtei Avotot, vayitnu shtei avotot hazahav al shtei hatabaot al ketzot hachoshen veit shtei ketzot shtei avotot natanu al shtei hamishpatzot vayitnu al kifot haifodom upanav vayasu shtei tabot zahav vayasi mos shtei ketzot hachoshen al sfato asher elever haifod bayita vayasu shtei tabot zahav vayitnu al shtei chitfot haifod mamata mimul panav umat machpato mimal lechesef haifod varikesu et achoshen mitavotav adabot haifod biftil techelet lihiyot achesef haifod v'lizach achoshen me'al haifod ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nasa lanu Torah Service v'chayei amlatot esapenu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu haTorah.
Amen.
So in this aliyah, we have a description of the priestly garments being made, and we have the choshen, which is the breastplate, and as we read these things, I said one thing we can do is imagine them. The other thing is to think about how things have changed and what is the continuing resonance of these items which have disappeared a long time ago. What's its resonance for us since the destruction of the temple and since none of this was ever operable ever again? So I want to point out two things that this topic, this Torah portion, these various Torah portions have given us down through time. So one is that the breastplate is called Choshen HaMishpat. So the breastplate of judgment. We have an amazing legal legacy, and we have, in the last time that we had an effort by somebody to create an encompassing code of Jewish law, we had a product called the Shulchan Aruch, the set table. It was produced in the 16th century. We've been using that book ever since, so it's come in handy. And it's divided up into sections, and one of those sections is about civil law, and it's called Choshen Mishpat. It takes its name from this priestly garment. So it's quite interesting to me. We have something that was once upon a time the high priest's exclusive, amazing uniform with precious stones and with being used by one and only this man in this holy place. Couldn't go out into the street with it. It had to be used only in that sacred spot. And then what we've taken is that imagery and we've used it as inspiration. How do we ornament our lives? And the Jewish approach to ornamenting our lives is to encrust our lives not with precious gems, but with precious deeds and with precious values, so that the ins and outs of the legal intricacies of what's the right thing to do in a business deal, what's the right thing to do when I have property, how do I deal with my neighbor, that was labeled the very same holy, precious, glittering asset of Judaism, just like the priestly breastplate itself. And various phrases in our Torah reading were then used by legal commentators. Some of the greatest legal minds of our history named their own books of legal argumentation by the phrases that are used in this Torah reading. So just one example, the Tzot HaChoshen. In Yeshiva it's called the Tzos. Sos is a brilliant, subtle, profound analysis of Jewish law in civil law items, not about ritual law and stuff like that. That's another section. But specifically in civil law, takes his name from this Torah portion and this Aliyah that we just read. So there's this kind of reincarnation that transfigures the Torah reading's original image and yet preserves it in a very keen way. On a much more physical and literal level, there's a phrase here that comes again and again. And for instance, we have on the top of 567, the breastpiece was held in place by a cord of blue. That cord of blue is called a ktil techelet. That's the same phrase, and that's the same idea that the Torah then later itself says not only should this cord of blue be a specialized item in the uniform of the high priest and nobody else, but that cord of blue becomes an item for every single Jew to wear in their uniform. The original plan for the talit was that the talit would have tassels on every corner, and one of the strings, not all of them, the rest of the strings are white. There are eight strings because it's 4 doubled over, but one of them was a ktil techelet, was a cord of blue. We have a whole article in the back of our Eitz Chaim Chumash that talks about how this is meant for all of us. As the Torah once told us when we first came to Mount Sinai, if you receive the Torah, says God, you will all be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So we take something from this priestly uniform, and in ancient days, every single Jew was supposed to have that little piece of priestly identity to remind them of who they were.
The next aliyah is on page 567, verse 22.
Nalamo,
Levana Batsar Abraham.
Lalia Gimel,
Baruch et Adonai Hambarak. Baruch Adonai Hambarak le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bahu bani kol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torto. Baruch atah Adonai notenu Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayas Emil Haifod Masei Oreg Gilio Techelet Ufiham Il B'Tocho Kefi Tachra Safar Lefiv Saviv Lo Yikareya Vayasil Shalem Il Rimone Techelet Ragamam V'Tolach Ani Moshe Zar Vayasu Vayasu Zahav Tahor Vayitnu Et Pamonim B'Toch Harimonim Al Shalem Il Saviv B'Toch Harimonim Pamon V'Rimon Al Shalem Il Saviv L'Sharet Kasher Tziva Adonai et Moshe Esu Yakot Not Sheish Masei Oreg Lehavon Ulvanav Veit Hamitznef et Sheish Eparei Hamikpaot Sheish Vepiknesei Habad Sheish Moshe Zar Et Avneit Sheish Moshe Zar Mutchel et Vagaman Tola Shani Masei Rokem Kasher Tziva Adonai et Moshe Vayasu Et Tzitz Nezer HaKodesh Zahav Tahor Vektivu Alav Miktapi Tuchechotam Kodesh Ladonai Vaitnu Alav Patio Techelet Ateidah Mitnefet Me'amala Kasher Tziva Adonai et Moshe Vateichel Kol Avodat Mishkan El HaMoed Vayasu B'nei Yisrael Kechol Asher Tziva Adonai et Moshe Kenasu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natu lanu Torah emet. V'chayei olam atah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai notenu Torah.
Amen.
So in this aliyah, we have another instance of something that was very uniquely specified for the uniform of the high priest. And then we have in the Torah itself a transformation of it and a recollection of it that is then given over to the people themselves to everyone. And that is what's called here a frontlet for the holy diadem, right? Vayasu et tzitz nezer hakodesh, and they incised upon it the seal of inscription, holy to the Lord. So there are two connections here to be made. Number one, in the language, it should recall for us something that we just talked about. The tzitz is the same thing as the tzitzit. The tzitzit. And it's about something that is prominently visible, something that you can see. Right? Meitzitz min acharakim, we have in the Song of Songs, peering out from the cracks. My lover peers out from the cracks. So the tzitz is an evident, visible adornment on the head. So of course the tzitzit are not on the head necessarily, unless you wrap your talit and put your talit over your head as well. And of course we have here in our Torah reading the mention of the fact that all of the priests had to wear hats, had to have a head covering. But then there's another aspect to this tzitz idea. Can anybody suggest what Jewish accoutrement, what Jewish article that is worn might be? Oh, look at Adam. He's like already. He's trying to give the answer to somebody else. Okay, right. What Jewish article of clothing, in the loosest way of thinking that, something that's worn by a Jew, which is meant to be something that is seen prominently and which signals that we are dedicated, Kodesh Lashem, that we are dedicated to God. All right, so which one of you is going to say it? Say it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, the tefillin. Right, the tefillin, and especially the head tefillin, recall the same thing. And if the tzitz was worn with the tefillin, according to tradition, there's enough room to put both of them at the top of the head, not down here. We had a whole workshop on this, the Worldwide Wrap. What was it? This past Sunday, 2 Sundays ago?
Yeah, Sunday.
Unbelievable. It's like 1,000 years ago.
Time goes.
Yeah. But the idea being that everyone should see that we are bound up, literally, with God, and God's name is placed upon our head as a crown. So another back and forth, something very exclusive and specialized, and then a taste of that given to each and every one of us to experience every day.
The fourth aliyah is found on page 569, chapter 40, verse 1.
Amen. Vayaviut hamishkan Moshe et ha'ohav v'kokelav krasav krashav richav hanudav varanav ve'miksei orot ha'ilim hameodamim ve'miksei orot ha'techashim ve'et parochet ha'masach Don't have to fit padav, they take up poet, Tashochan love, they lechem hapanim, et hamenorah tehorah, et erotea, nerot, hamarachav kokeleha, they chemen hamaor, mizbach hazahav, they mizbach hazahav, they chemen hamishcha, they ketoet hasamim, masach, petaka ohel, mizbach hanechoshet, but mizbach hanechoshet asher lo, et padav, the kokelav, takiyor v'kano, eight. Chatzir, Tamudeh V'Tataneh, V'Tamazach L'Shar Chatzir, V'Mitarav V'Tidoteh, Eid, Koklei, Avodat HaMishkan L'Hamoed, Epigdei HaSarad L'Sharet B'Kodesh, Epigdei HaKodesh L'Aaron HaKohen, Epigdei Banav L'Chahen, Kecho, Asher Tziva Adonai Moshe, Kein Asu B'nei Yisrael, Eik L'Havodah, ויאמר משה כל המלאכה, הנה עשו אותה כאשר דיבר אדוני כן עשו, ויברך אותם משה. Amen.
Our Aliyah ends with all of the items of the Mishkan brought to Moses. Moses looks at and sees that everything has been completed, and then Moses blesses the people. Many commentators throughout the generations have noted that this whole endeavor is written in a way that is meant to recall for us the creation of the world. And we have at the very beginning of Genesis. And God creates the world, we create a sacred space for God. Just like God created the world, after 6 days God sits back, looks at everything, Vayara Elokim et kol asher asa. And the Almighty looked and saw everything that God had done, V'hinei tov ma'od. And it was really good. It was really good. God, as it were, pats God's self on the back and said, not bad, not too shabby. And then God blesses the last day of creation, the Shabbat. So we talked last time and other times about, again, this kind of transposition between the holiness of Shabbat and the holiness here. Moses blesses the people for creating this place of holiness and meeting between God and Israel. One of the details that's mentioned here about this created space and the implements in it is found on 37, verse 37, 568. V'et hamenorah hatahorah. So the translation, the pure lampstand, the menorah, right? And it's called tahorah. It's called pure. So again, careful readers, that's who actually read this stuff and see comparatively what's happening. Notice that the ark is not called tahor, pure. The altars are not called pure. Why is the menorah called pure? Tahorah. That word tahor is not mentioned. You would think all of these super holy things, why aren't they called tahor? They're called holy, but they're not called pure. They're not called tahor. The menorah is called tahor. So some would suggest it's because it's made out of pure gold, and it's just pure gold. There's no added ingredients, so to speak. And the gold is called pure gold. That was what was used in the temple. But one of the medieval commentators, Greenstein, he says the reason that the menorah is called pure is because it is uniquely, or almost uniquely, there's another item, the shulchan, which is also called tahor. Those two are the only that are called tahor, but we're concentrating here on the menorah because they never had blood thrown on them. The altar had blood. Of course, literally the sacrifices, the blood of the sacrifices, but not only that, ritually, we would sprinkle blood on the altar. We would sprinkle blood toward the ark on Yom Kippur. We would sprinkle blood on all of the other implements in the tabernacle as a ritual of expiation and atonement. Right? If not for the grace of God, this blood would be mine. So we literally act out the spilling of blood in various rituals in the temple. The menorah was never, according to the Chizkuni, was never profaned by blood. In our Haftarah today, we will read about the story of Solomon, King David's son, building the temple. Right? The Mishkan was a portable shrine, and finally we build a permanent house for God in Jerusalem, and that was the first temple. Solomon built it. Why didn't David build it? And the Tanakh says at the end of Divrei Hayamim, Chronicles, that God says to David, you've done so much for me. It's great what you've done. You want to build a house for me. That was David's great dream, to build the temple. He finds and he designates Jerusalem as the place, and from then on that's been the place. But God says, your hands drip blood. You're not going to build a house for me. You have been engaged in war, and that cannot be the basis for then building a shrine, a house for my dwelling. The altar itself, God says, do not use a sword, a metal cutter to cut the stones to build the altar, because that's an implement of war. So in these days where we tremble and are very, very anxious and depressed and fearful, and from the safety of an ocean away, contemplating the horror of what evil people can choose to inflict on other people, and then how all of us are implicated in that. All of us have to figure out what is our response. Whose side do we go toward? Whose side do we support? And this is a challenge that is not a choice for the people in Ukraine. They have no choice. I mean, they can get run over by a tank or they can fight. But we need to make those choices. We need to find ways to meaningfully help innocent people who are being attacked for no reason whatsoever, a war that has absolutely no justification. And we see within our own country people who are apologists for this kind of evil. And unfortunately, we see in our own greater Jewish community people who are hesitant to come out loud and clear, and people who have the ability to help the Ukrainian government and who have refrained from helping because they don't want to endanger in the realpolitik games that they love to play, which are dripping with blood all the time. They don't want to endanger the kind of relationship that they've already built so shrewdly and so masterfully with strong, powerful people. Power is not a good in itself. The test of whether power is good is what it's used for. I had a little back and forth with a good friend of mine in Israel, and he mentioned that Natan Sharansky, who is a very admired figure who went through tremendous difficulties because he wanted to be a Jew. He was persecuted for it. He wanted to be free. He was persecuted for it. He was a prisoner of Zion. He eventually made it to Israel, and he made it a career as somebody active in Israeli public work. And at a wedding this week, he was said to have said, my friend reported to me, that he said, look at the strange twists and turns of history. I grew up, says Sharansky, I grew up in Ukraine. I had my identity card, just like everybody else had, and everybody's identity card said what nationality they were. Russian, Ukrainian, Chechen, I don't know, what Azinian, Moldavian, I don't know. You had all kinds of cards with identities written on them, Polish, and the only identity that was significant to know whether you had it on your card or not, all the other ones were irrelevant, was if you had Jew. If you had Jew on your identity card, you knew that you were in trouble. You knew that you weren't going to get ahead. You knew that you weren't going to have an easy life. And people did so many things that they could to, get a phony card, change it, not have that prominent declaration that they were Jewish, to save their lives, to save their careers, to save their families. That was how he grew up. He says, and now, in that beleaguered, besieged, tragic place, if you have a card that says you're Jewish, your chances of escape are so much greater than anybody else's. Because you have a place that will take you in. You have a place that you have an organized effort that will take you at the border, free you, get you out of there, and bring you to a Jewish home. So look at how history has flipped around. Right? It was a mark of Cain, so to speak, and now it's a lifesaver. So, it was pretty powerful stuff that he said. He's a very smart man. He's a very courageous and dedicated man. But as I was thinking about it, I said back to my friend, but that's all good. But there's something else that's also amazing in the twists and turns of our world. That country, which many of us know, is a country whose earth is drenched with Jewish blood. A place that, as Sharansky said, was not a safe home for Jews. Nevertheless, they lived there and died there for generations. That same country with that very recent, terrible, murderous history toward the Jews has chosen a president who is a Jew. Who would have thunk? Who would have predicted something like that? And then one more thing. That Jew who is in all of the media, in everyone's attention, is a person who is literally sanctifying God's name. The way that he is living, the way that he is leading his people, all of his people. That secular comedian, right, it's Adar, right? This jokester is a person who is establishing God's holiness in this world with every word that he says. While the leaders of the Jewish state are hiding with their tails between their legs to try not to take a stand in favor of innocence, peace, purity, because maybe some of the people that they look after, they're afraid of what the Jews' destiny will be in Russia. That is a serious question. But you're going to worry about their destiny while the Jews in Ukraine are being murdered right and left by the bombs and the invaders that are coming in. I don't know. So we live in interesting times, as is sometimes said. And this very supposedly irrelevant Torah reading about something that was put together thousands of years ago and is no longer around, totally defunct, it calls us to think about these things, to examine what is the role that we have in creating holiness in this world. What role does power politics play? What values do we need to marshal? What kind of courage, what kind of calculations do we need to make in balancing the spilling of blood with creating a world that has God's presence in it? God who created this world and said, let there be light.
My apologies for misleading you on the previous Aliyah. Now, the fifth Aliyah is on page 569, chapter 40, verse 1.
Rivka,
Natalia.
Rivka bat Chaya B'tzvi.
Natalia. Hey.
Baruch Adonai Barak.
Adonai Barak Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barak Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'archa banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torah. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור ביום החודש הראשון באחד לחודש תקים את משכן המועד ושמת שם את ארון העדות וסקרת לאהרון את הפרוכת וביתת השולחן וערכת את ערכו וביתת המנורה והעלית את נרותיה נתת מזבח הזהב וקטורת לפני ארון העדות ושמת את מסך הפתח למשכן ונתת מזבח עולה לפני פתח משכן המועד ונתת כיור בין המועד ובין המזבח ונתת שם מים ושמת את החצר סביב ונתת את מסך שער החצר לקחת את שמן המשחה משחת המשכן וכאשר בו קידשת אותו וכל כליו והיה קודש משחת מזבח עליו וכל כליו קידשת את המזבח והיה המזבח קודש קודשים, משחת את הכיור וקנו, קידשת אותו, הקרבת את אהרון ופניו לפתח המועד, ורחצת אותם במים, ולבשת את אהרון את בגדי הקודש, משחת אותו, קידשת אותו, וכיהן לי בפניו תקריב, ולבשת אותם כותונות, משחת אותם, כאשר משחת את אביהם, חיינו לי, והייתה להיות להם מושחתם, לכהונת עולם לדורותם, ויעש משה ככל אשר ציווה אדוני אותו כן עשה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נתת בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
So for our prayers for those we know of who are ill, if you have a name to add, please stand in your place. We'll go around to add those names as well. מי שברך אבותינו מקור הברכה לאמותינו. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. מי שברך אמותינו מקור הברכה לאבותינו. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Adam Batke, Kathy Moss, and Faith Tarhan.
כל החולים והנפגעים בגוף שאנחנו מתפללים עבורם, ספר לשלוח תשלח להם מהר רפואת שלהם מן השמיים. רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף, ולהם תפלים בהם יברכם הקדוש ברוך הוא. בבריאות ובלב, חוכמה ותבונה עוצמה ואהבה, כדי שתחלו בהם כראוי.
Amen.
Pray that their Pomer Shalom grant the refuah shlemah, complete and speedy recovery to all those who are suffering. May God bless their caregivers with good health and with hearts of strength and courage and love and wisdom to be able to do everything possible and everything necessary on their behalf. Let us all say Amen.
Amen. The sixth aliyah is found on page 570, verse 17.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai HaBarak Le'olam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torah. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayehi b'chodesh harishon b'shana hashinit b'echad lachodesh hukam hamishkan vayakem Moshe et hamishkan v'tin et aranav v'yasem et krashav v'tin et brichav vayakem et emudav v'yputz et ha'ohel hamishkan v'yasem miksei ha'ohel alav milmala asher zivar Adonai et Moshe Vayikach, v'tein taidut el ha'aron, v'yasem et ha'badim al ha'aron, v'tein et ha'kaporet al ha'aron milmala, v'yavet ha'aron el ha'mishkan, v'yasem et parok et ha'masach, v'yasech al ha'aron haidut, kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe, v'tein et ha'shulchan be'el moed, al yerech ha'mishkan safona, michutz ha'parochet, v'yerech alav, Erech lechem lifnei Adonai, kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe, v'yasem et ha'menorah be'el moed, nochach ha'shulchan, al yerech ha'mishkan negba, v'yal ha'nerot lifnei Adonai, kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe, v'yasem et mizbach hazachah be'el moed, lifnei ha'parochet, v'yakter alav ketoret samim, kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher natan lanu Torah emet. Chayei olam natah b'tokenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. The seventh aliyah is found on page 571, verse 28.
At the end of this aliyah, we'll be concluding the book of Shemot. We'll rise for the last verse, and afterwards we'll all declare together, Chazak, Chazak, B'dit Chazak.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Amen.
Amen. Vayasem masach petach lamishkan ve'mizbach olasam petach mishkan u'moed vayal alav tolav tamincha kasher tziva Adonai Moshe vayasem nakiyor ben ha'moed u'ben mizbech v'tein shama mayim l'rochza v'rachatzu mimenu Moshe v'Aaron u'banav tidehem v'traglehem v'voam el ha'moed v'kovatam al mizbech yirchatzu kasher Tziva Adonai Moshe, vayakem et hakatzer, saviv lamishkan v'lamizbech, vayitein masach shar hakatzer, vayecha Moshe et hamelacha, vayechas yanan et ochel moed, uchvod Adonai, maleh et hamishkan, v'lecha Moshe, lavor lehomoed, ki shachan alav yanan, uchvod Adonai, maleh et hamishkan, ve'elotenam el mishkan, yis'u b'nei Yisrael, v'chol masehem, Bin lo yele yanan v'lo yisu ad yom haloto.
Rise.
Ki anan Adonai al mishkan yomam ve'esh tihye laila bo le'nechol beit Yisrael v'chol masehem. Chazak chazak v'nit chazek.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam natah b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Yikada v'yikada Shomrei Baba.
Amen.
V'yamad v'yirach v'yirutei v'yamlech malchutei.
V'yamlech v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, ubizman kariv, imru amen. Ishmael rabba mevora, le'olam lo me'almaya yitpa.
Shmei Kedusha.
Tush bechata v'nechemata namiran be'alma.
Be seated. Got Matthew.
The Mafter Aliyah is found on the bottom of page 571, verse 34.
Yehudi Chayim Zav V'Torah.
Aliyah HaMaftirah.
Baruch Adonai Barak.
Baruch Adonai Barak Olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barak Olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. Ve'enat amanu et Torah. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. Vayachas Hanan et El HaMoed. Uchvod Adonai Ma'aleh et HaMishkan. V'layachol Moshe. Lavor El HaMoed. Kishachan alav Hanan. Uchvod Adonai Ma'aleh et HaMishkan. Uvelot Hanan Me'al HaMishkan. Yisa'u b'nei Yisrael. B'chol Masehem. Bimlo Yeleh Hanan. V'lo Yisa'u ad Yom Herloto. Ki Hanan Adonai Al HaMishkan Yamam. Ve'esh Tihiyeh Laila Bo. L'nechol Beit Yisrael. B'chol Masehem.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher natan lanu Torah emet. V'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amalot v'hashbahat u'gelilat HaTorah.
לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני יד משה May be seated. Haftarah for Pekudei, found on page.
574.
There you go.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar b'nviim tovim. Ratzav Dibreihem Anemarim Bemet. Baruch Atah Adonai Habocher B'Torah Uv'Moshe Avdo Uv'Yisrael Amo Uv'Nviei Hamet V'Tzedek.
Amen. 580.
Vatishlam kol mlacha asher asa hamelech Shlomo beit Adonai vayaveh Shlomo et kadshei David aviv et hakesef et hazahav et hakelim natan ve'otzrot beit Adonai az Yakel Shlomo et Ziknei Yisroel et Kol Rashei Hamatot Nisiei Ha'avot Livnei Yisroel El HaMelech Shlomo Yerushalayim La'alot et Aaron Brit Adonai Meir David Hitzion Vayikalu El HaMelech Shlomo Kol Ish Yisrael V'yerech Ha'etanim Bechag Hu
HaChodesh HaShvi Vayavo Kol Ziknei Yisrael Vayisu HaKohanim Et HaAron Vaya'alu Et Aron Adonai V'et Ohel Moed V'kol Klei HaKodesh Asher Ba'ohel Vaya'alu Otam HaKohanim V'Halevim V'Hamelech Shlomo V'chol Adat Yisrael Hanoadim Allah Ito Lifnei HaAron Mizabchim Zon Uvakar Asher Lo Yisafru V'lo Yimanu Merov Vayaviu HaKohanim Et Aron Brit Adonai El Makomo El Devir HaBayit El Kodesh HaKodeshim El Tachat Kanfei HaKruvim Ki HaKruvim Porsim Knafayim El Mekom HaAron Vayasoku HaKruvim El HaAron V'al Badav Milmala Vaya'arichu Habadim Vayerau Rashi Habadim Min HaKodesh Apnei Advir V'lo Yerau HaChutza Vayihi Sham Ad Hayom Hazeh Ein Ba'aron Rak Shnei Luchot HaAvanim Asher Hiniach Sham Moshe B'chorev Asher Karat Adonai Im Bnei Yisrael V'tzetam Eretz Mitzrayim Vayehi V'tzeit HaKohanim Min HaKodesh Ve'anan Malei Et Beit Adonai V'lo Yachlu HaKohanim La'amod L'sharet B'pnei Ha'anan Ki Malei Kvod Adonai Et Beit Adonai Az Amar Shlomo Adonai Amar Lishkon Ba'arafel Bano Vaniti Beit Zevulach Machon Shivtecha Olamim Vayasev HaMelech Et Panav Vayevarech Et Kol Kahal Yisrael V'Kol Kahal Yisrael Omed Vayomer Baruch Adonai Elohei Yisrael Asher Diber Befiv Et David Avi Uvyado Milei Lemor Min Hayom Asher Hotzeti Et Ami Et Yisrael Mimitzrayim Lo Barachti Ve'ir Mikol Shivtei Yisrael Livnot Bait Liot Shemi Sham Ve'evchar B'David Liot Al Am Yisrael Vayehi Im Levav David Avi Livnot Bait L'Shem Adonai Elohei Yisrael Vayomer Adonai El David Avi Yan Asher Haya Im Levavecha Livnot Bait Lishmi Hativavota V'haya Im Levavecha Rak Ata Lo Tivneh Habayit Ki Im Bincha Hayotzei Michalatzecha U'yivneh Habayit Lishmi Vayakem Adonai Et Devaro Asher Diber Va'akum Tachat David Avi Va'eshev Al Kisei Yisrael Ka'asher Diber Adonai Ve'evneh Habayit L'Shem Adonai Elohei Yisrael Va'asim Sham Makom Laron Asher Sham Berit Adonai asher karat im avotenu botzio otam me'eretz Mitzrayim. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Sur kol haolamim Tzadik b'chol hadorot Hayal ne'eman ha'omer v'yosef Hamedaber umkayem Shekol devarav emet v'tzedek Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu Ne'emanim devarecha V'davar echad midvarecha Achur lo yashuv reikam Ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman ata Baruch ata Adonai Hayel ne'eman b'chol dvarav Rachem al Tzion ki beit chayenu V'lalu vat nefesh toshia b'mehera v'yameinu Baruch ata Adonai V'samech Tzion b'vaneha Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu V'eliyahu hanavi abdecha V'malchut beit David mishichecha B'mehera yavo v'yagel libenu Al kiso lo yeshev zar V'lo yunchalu od achirim et kvodo Ki b'shem kashecha nishbata lo Shelo yichbe neiro li'olam va'ed Baruch ata Adonai Magen David Al Torah v'al avodah v'al nevim v'al yom Shabbat hazeh Shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu Likdusha v'limnucha L'chavod u'tifaret Ala kol Adonai Eloheinu Anachnu modim lach u'mevarchim otach Yitbarach shimcha B'fi kochar tamid li'olam va'ed Baruch ata Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Thank you.
Page 148, the prayer for our country. Page 149, the prayer for the state of Israel.
Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessing for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, for all who exercise justice right before the Lord. Teach them insight into your Torah, and give them peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom, peace forever abide. Creator of all, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May wisdom, justice, and greed forge common bond in true harmony, grant nature and victory, and safeguard the ideals and free institutions that thrive and glory of our country. Make this land of your providence be an impulse of good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom. Help them live with your religion and your brother. Nation shall not discord against nation.
Amen. 149.
Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, Ur Yisrael, Tevolo, Oret et Emunah Yisrael, Re'ich Shikat U'Lateni, Hogei Oleha, Ve'Rachazdecha, U'Rosh Olecha, Sukat Shlomecha, U'Shlach Oracha V'Yamnitecha L'Masecha, Zorecha V'Yoasecha, V'Tachnei V'Eitzah Tova Milchonecha, Hazeh Erizeh Minei Eretz Kosheni, V'Hakilei Eloheinu Yeshua, V'Aseret Tzorachon V'Yatrein, V'Takata Shalom V'Oretz, V'Simchat Shalom V'Mizbecha, V'Nomar Amen.
Amen. Please join with me the prayer for peace, middle of 149. May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world. Then nation will not threaten nation, and mankind will not again know war. For all who live on earth shall realize, we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love. Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion. Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture. I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you. I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war. Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say, Amen. May be seated for a moment. 151. Adonai Rabbi Kivi Varech Kol Basar Shem Kosher Olam Va'ed V'Anachnu Nevarech Yamei Chavi Adolam Hallelujah 153 Hallelujah Shem Adonai Yiniskav Shemo Levado Odo Alerech V'Shamayim V'Yavarech Eliyahu Dila L'Kol Hasina B'nei Yisrael Amro Hallelujah Hallelujah Yirmol David Adonai lama buya Shabbat Adonai melech leolam Adonai os le'amo yitein Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom u'nucho yomar Eitz chayim hi lama chazikim ba V'tom cheha merusha deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom ashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu We continue with Musaf. The F Kaddish is on page 155, and then the Musaf Amidah will begin as a community, page 156b through 157, and then our silent prayers. יתקדש שמי רבה, יעמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי, וחייכון וימכון וחי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם לא מאלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם, ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי לקודש יבריחו, וילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu V'Imoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים מכל יעקב וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם כל חיים בחסד מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים נעריצך ונקדישך כסוד שיח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה ויאמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו כבודו מלא עולם משרתיו שואלים זה לזה איה מקום כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו הוא יפן ברחמים ויחון עם המייחדים שמו ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים באהבה שמה אומרים שמה ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים כהדושתך נקדיש כהדושתך נקדיש בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי המלך קדוש וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Full Kaddish. Page 181. Thank you. Gadal v'kadash Rabbi, Yamad Ibrachi Rutevim Nichmalchuteh b'chayechonu v'yamechonu b'chay d'chol Beit Yisrael b'agalau v'zman kariv imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbi mevarach li'olam u'milmaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpah v'yitroma v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei l'kudisha b'richu Yela min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata da'amiram di'alma v'imru amen. Yitkabel tzloton v'oton l'chol Yisrael kodama v'hon v'yishmaya v'imru amen. Yesh lam Rabba min Shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom v'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol Yoshvei Tevel v'imru amen. 182. Ein keloheinu, ein kadoneinu, ein kemalkeinu, ein kemoshienu, mi Eloheinu, mi kadoneinu, mi kemalkeinu, mi kemoshienu. Nodel Eloheinu. You gonna join us? Come on. Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adoneinu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adoneinu, Atahu Malkeinu, Tahu Moshienu, Tahu Shehiktiru, Avoteinu, Lefahanecha Eketoret Asami. 183, please rise, nice and loud. Aleinu
Shabeach Ladon Hakol Lated Gedulah Yotzer Breshit Shelo Asanu Kikoya Haratzot
Velo Samanu Kimishbechot Adama Shelo Sam Chelkeinu Kahem Vegoraleinu Kechol Hamoram Anachnu Korim Umishtachavim Umolim Lifnei Melech Malkei Hamayim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. תשמע לי עושה רצמה שבט רבה שמע לי משנה זה ביקורים מה מהם אלוהים על כן נקבל חוק אלוהים
Adonai Yimloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lamelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu
yeh Adonai echad u'shema These are the yard sites we observe in our community this week. Morton Antelman, Abraham Arnowitz, Florence Bettinger, Mary Books, Ernest Zinn, Ben Kingdon Eisenberg, Herman Goldberg, Minnie Greenbaum, Rose Grafman, Ida Kraus, Harry Marianov, Marcus Perlman, Stephen Rosenblatt, Julian Rosenthal, William Rudensi. Yehi Zichram Baruch. May their memories be a source of blessing for all of us. Take a seat over there. Mourner's Kaddish, page 184. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shmei Rabbi. Yalmad Ivrach Hirutei v'yamlich Malchutei v'chayechonu v'yomechonu v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'hagala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbi mevarach li'olam l'olmeil mayah Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei d'kudisha b'richu Yeila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol Yoshvei Tevel v'imru amen.
Yasha Koach to all who participated in today's service. Do it Lily's way. She puts it fair. Everybody is cordially invited to the Kaddish immediately following. in the social hall. There are signs out to please use tongues. We're getting towards the endemic stage. Let's keep it that way. Thank you to Eileen Grossberg, Zen Lucy, and Charlie Steindel for setting up the Kaddish. David, for myself, the officers, the trustees, and the entire congregation, we extend our heartfelt condolences on the loss of your mother. David is sitting shiver, so tomorrow, the 9 a.m. Sunday morning minyan will be at David's house, and then Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night, from 7 to 9, he will be sitting shiver, and services will be at 7:30. Next Saturday, we celebrate our first bar mitzvah. Mazel tov. So we're getting there, folks. And then after that, we have Purim. And if you have not done your Shalach Minot, do it after Shabbat and before the deadline. If you do not want to get a call from Charlie Breslin, if you want to hear from Charlie, that's between the two. That's between the two of you. And then.
And as the Rabbi said, where we not only, so we don't keep track so much of who donates, but if you donate and participate in the Shalach Minot fundraiser, your name gets listed on every bag that goes to everyone, and you get your chance to write your own personal greeting to the congregation.
Which is fun trying to figure out what you want to say.
Yes.
But anyhow.
Happy Purim if you're at a loss.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Purim is Wednesday, March 16th. We'll do Purim for Tots. We'll do the Spiel. We'll do Marav. We'll do the Megillah reading. And the Purim Carnival will be Sunday. Purim Carnival, in person again. Will be Sunday, March 20th from 11 to 1. And Shabbat Shalom.
I have a question.
Yes.
We're probably not the only ones who know so shomrei.org/yum. Y-U-M.
Okay.
Purim morning at 8:30, there will be a Megillah reading that will be live streamed. We won't have an in-person minyan, but there will be a Megillah reading done by Andy from the sanctuary, and you can tune in at 8:30. 187, Adon Olam. Anybody else want to join in? What's going to be the tune here? What do you got? Adon Olam Asher Malach. There you go. You guys want to do Vishamru for Kaddish? Vishamru. All right? Yeah, let's get it here. Over here. Kiddush in a half a second. Page 34 if you want to look for the words. 34. Visham. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat la'asot et Shabbat ledorotam b'ridodam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat la'asot et Shabbat
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledortam b'ritolam. Kishesh yamim asa Adonai et ha-Shamayim v'et ha'aretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledortam b'ritolam. Vayom hashvi Shabbat vayinachash Shabbat vayinachash Shabbat vayinachash v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam b'ritolam.
Al ken birachanot yom ha-Shabbat v'yikadshehu savri chaverai v'amat Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafei. Put your right hand in, put your left hand in, put your right hand in, put your left hand in, put your right hand in, put your left hand in, put your right hand in, put your left hand in, put your right hand in, put your left hand in, put your right hand in, put your right hand in. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Olam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. Amen. And now, ready? Okay, ready? Baruch
atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. Share this one apart. This is for you, this is for you. Yeah. There.
Rip it to shreds.
You. All right. B'tei Avon, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. That's your car.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. Let's go back.
Obviously, I cannot be trusted.
Only as much as you want. Oh,
Hey,
yeah.
I'm okay. I just wanted to let you know that it is not in the we have one with the hospice, and it appears that he has some sort of internal bleeding. So I don't know what that means. Yes, St. Barnabas. So I'm going to go after this, and I'll keep you posted. All right. We'll see. Yeah, it's just another. Going to the emergency room is another aspect of his healthcare regimen. We're quite fine. Although I am concerned about this.
Let's clear it up. Let's
Yeah,
make sure it's okay.
yeah. We'll let you know what's happening.
Thank you. Join us for some eating? Great.